and Umatilla County signals. So without any further ado, let's dive right in.
All right, Commissioner Smith and committee members, glad to come and talk about the I-84 Meacham to Camila paving and Umatilla signal project. It's not quite $50 million in total cost, but it's close enough that it warrants, it's a large project for us and warrants a conversation with the committee and talk about the project. Joining me today, I've got, well, let me share my screen. Okay, maybe I don't have sharing rights.
Sabrina, is that something you can pull up?
Oh, I'm getting it here.
I was going to say you should be able to share, but I have it ready if you don't get it up.
Okay, is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So this is a heavy, construction or heavy preservation project on I-84 between Pendleton and LeGrand. And with me today, I've got a few folks kind of in the wings that if there's any particular questions or we need to dive in a little deeper on some topics. I've got Sean Maloney. He's our area manager for Eastern Oregon. And prior to that, he was the project delivery manager, or he was the project manager that put this together for the design phase. Also from our construction, I've got Josh McCullough. He's our resident engineer in Eastern Oregon. And so this is a project that he's just wrapping up. We were just talking one little last bit of work, but it's substantially complete. And he can handle any questions or details that we've got from the committee or anybody else around the construction. And then Mark Keitlinger. Mark's been with ODOT for 35 plus years. He's designed a lot of our black and white projects, is what we call this style of pavement treatment in Eastern Oregon. Has a lot of experience with that. So from any design questions, if anything comes up that's beyond what I can handle, we can dive in on that. So that's just kind of a quick overview of who you got in front of you today. I-84 runs, it's the primary route through Oregon, east-west, runs in the northern part, northeast corner of the state. We've had a series of similar projects, and this is the latest one where we're making some substantial preservation treatments to the freeway. This particular segment, it runs between the town of Meacham, which is right at the top of the Blue Mountains, and Camila, which was an old Union Pacific station there where employees would switch trains. But anyways, that's our segment of road. It's about 10 miles long. It's freeway with 2 lanes in each direction. Prior to the project, it was all asphalt concrete for all 4 lanes. And it was a section of road, as our pavement engineers know, between Pendleton and LeGrand. We have a very difficult time maintaining any sort of pavement life with asphalt paving. And if you're traveling up there any given summer, you can see some substantial work being performed by our maintenance crews to fill ruts, potholes, things of that nature. But I think it's just kind of the nature of that freeway section with lots of high water table. It gets a lot of heavy truck traffic. It's about 50% trucks in the year round. We don't get that much in the way of ADT. We have about 10,000 vehicles a day over that, but it does get a lot of truck chain wear, and it does have a high percentage of truck usage. And so our problem that we typically have up there is in the right lane, the asphalts would fail, and we would typically get about 6 to 7 years, well short of the 15 to 20 years that we would hope to get out of an asphalt pavement concrete. So that's the kind of nature of the project. Up in the mountains, fairly remote. And so before we jump into the presentation and talk about the project in general, I kind of wanted to seed a few questions to the committee to think about, because there's a lot of things that we think went very well on this project, but there's always some things that we can improve. And so what I wanted to do is at the beginning of our presentation, throw out a few questions for the committee to consider as we go through the presentation or have any thoughts on. So the first one is how to increase DBE participation on rural projects. And later in the presentation, we'll have some information about what our DBE goal was for this project and what the participation rate was. And when you look at that, you can probably see that there might be some room for improvement overall compared to the statewide average. But so we're just looking for ways to increase DBE participation in rural areas where we don't have a lot of firms to draw from or suppliers. The second one is how to reduce climate impacts on heavy preservation projects. And there's one element of this project that we'll be talking about where we were able to do some adjustments in our materials in the construction to drop our climate impacts or greenhouse gas emissions on part of this project. But there's always going to be additional pressure to try to reduce or decarbonize transportation. And so if there's anything in the presentation here or some thoughts that folks have on how to, different ways of approaching the work or, different materials or ways that we can reduce our climate impacts on heavy, maintenance type projects. These types of preservation projects are our bread and butter. We kind of have to do them with, paving and bridge repair, but they don't generally check a lot of boxes for our climate goals in terms of adding active transportation and transportation alternatives, but there might be other ways to move the climate goals forward in this body of work. And then the other one is...
Sorry, Ken, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
When you say reduce climate impacts on heavy preservation projects, are you referring to the emissions associated with the construction itself, like the use of the equipment or the patching used or whatever materials, or are you referring to the increased emissions from traffic that will be seen as the result of like a better maintained road?
Shanna, that's going to be more of the former, the reduced materials, more efficient materials, maybe some methodologies, ways to make our footprint of the construction less climate impacting. Just kind of a preview of a future slide. We've got a change. So we did a test section in our Portland cement concrete and reduced. Kind of a preview of a future slide. Feedback here. Change. So we did. Okay. As far as inducing traffic due to better roads, at least in Eastern Oregon, we don't see a lot of that. We're pretty population constrained, and it's the primary route, so we don't see a lot of transportation choices shifting to the highways as a result of having a better road. But anyways, we'd be welcome. We would welcome ideas on how to reduce the climate impacts of our preservation projects. And then the last question that we have, or we'd ask this group, is how to increase contractor competition. There's been a lot of consolidation in the industry over the years, especially in Oregon, and the economist in me likes to see lots of competition, lots of firms getting access to projects, and giving the opportunities to engage in ODOT's construction program. And so that's probably the third major goal that we'd like to see, is increased competition on projects. So I wanted to seed the conversation with those three questions before we jumped into a lot of the project details. And certainly if anybody has other ideas of the questions we should be asking, by all means, let me know and we'll engage. So.
And Ken, maybe you were going to get to this, but what was the delivery model? Is this a design bid build?
Yeah, thank you. This is a design bid build. And the reason we went with that is that at least in Region 5, we've had a history of delivering these black and white freeway preservation projects with internal, staff.
Yeah.
It's a very much, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but we have a lot of history with them. And
Mhm.
so we didn't need to bring additional types of, consultant resources on to, handle some unique situations that we weren't aware of. And from a design build standpoint, there's, we've been pretty efficient. Our PE on this was running just around 5.5%. It was a pretty low cost for us to be able to deliver it internally. Any other questions before we jump in?
I'm curious, you're talking about DBE participation. I see you've got Taro on this, even though the project's really outside the reservation, but we have a Taro requirement. And yet it didn't seem like we got much participation out of the tribe to bring people up to work. What happened?
Well, and we meet with the tribe. Well, let me back up real quick. Appreciate the question. The Taro boundary for Northeast Oregon, is basically all of Morrow, Umatilla, Union, Wallowa, and Baker counties. And so this fell fully within the MOU boundary for the Taro program. We meet each year with the Taro staff and discuss the goals that are set on the projects. And the way that the MOU is wrote, the Taro program sets the goals. And then if they do have challenges in getting staff up there to projects, they will reduce those goals. And I will say that over the years, the goals have probably been set higher than what they've been actually able to fulfill. Now that's not a bad thing in my mind. We've had during the period of time that we were working on Meacham to Camila, this would normally be a very attractive project for a lot of the tribal members that are participating in the Taro program. But we've also had a huge body of work around ADA in Eastern Oregon. And so that meant a lot of work closer to home, less travel. And so they were able to meet their goals, more fully on those projects that were closer to the reservation and at a lower cost to, the employees that are traveling. So it was low. We do talk about that, about trying to tailor those goals a little bit better, but to the type of work we're doing. And we do that. Electrical type projects with signals tend to have a very low goal, but a heavy project like this one, there's lots of opportunities for laborers and operators, and they do tend to set a standard, high goal for that.
Can I ask maybe a dumb question? And we probably covered this before, but are there DBE goals for each project, or do we look at them sort of on a ODOT portfolio-wide basis?
It's going to be both. We're trying to hit an aggregate goal for the state, but you have to look at the types of projects you have and location. And so we work with our folks from the Office of Civil Rights. And, for an example, earlier this spring, we sat down and went through each of the projects, anticipated types of works, and what types of DBE firms would be able to fulfill that goal. And then we do set those goals accordingly. So some of it's based on travel. We don't have as many firms out here in Eastern Oregon, so we do tend to run with a little lower goal. But statewide, there is a higher goal that we're trying to build towards. And so it's going to be project dependent.
Yeah, it just strikes me as kind of, not understanding this world really at all, but like inefficient if you're trying to kind of hit DBE goals in areas where there really is low DBE contractor availability. And, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but maybe thinking about it more holistically, and wishing Amber were here because she knows so much about this world. But yeah, it just seems like there's efficiencies to be gained in kind of how we think about DBE contracting.
Well,
Could I just ask, have you done a recent disparity study for DBEs to understand who's where in the state and what their capabilities are?
Yeah,
Back, yeah.
I'll jump in. It's fascinating that this is coming up because questions were coming up earlier this week about this topic. So yeah, disparity study, we're in the midst of updating that. And I think we're like really close to getting FHWA approval on it, which Shauna, great questions, because what the disparity study does is it forces us to look at what is that disparity of DBEs across the state and gives us some insight into some local specific disparity. And so we're going to increase, I think, we're likely going to see our DB percentage for ODOT statewide go up to 25%. Yeah, so Paula, I'm watching your face. That's a jump from where we've been in the teens because the disparity study is showing that. And so then that will allow us, and really our Office of Equity and Civil Rights group manages that along in partnership with Project Delivery. We'll be looking at, so what's the type of work, to Ken's point, where is it located, and where do we, I guess, balance that percentage? And let's face it, in the Valley and in the Portland metro area, the percentage is generally going to be higher on a given project than in rural areas. But what we're hearing is there's still quite a bit of missed opportunity even in rural areas, but we have to be, I think, a bit more strategic in which projects we're putting what goal on. So Ken, appreciate you raising we got all the ADA curb ramp work going on at the same time that we have this project going on. How are we balancing that desire to reach a goal and reach that engagement with our DB partners without, setting one project up for not meeting it? So anyway, good dialogue.
I think you've got a real tough road to go with the large projects coming up in the Portland area. And I mean, everybody's trying to figure out how to meet those DB goals, and you start raising it to 25% throughout the state. There's going to be a lot of issues in trying to meet any kind of a goal.
Yeah, Ted, we're certainly hearing it from, I think, all angles right now. And I think that's going to be part of the art, right, of the influence of those big projects. And Ted, you know this better than I do, the influence of those big projects versus what can we accomplish in the other corners of the part of the state that we're doing work in.
Well, I mean, we're having real problems finding minorities on jobs in Portland, and we've always been lower out in the rural area because they just weren't there. I know the Taro thing came in so we could meet some of those goals easier by putting out, the Taro throughout the counties. And, but that hasn't really worked well. I mean, we've opened them up, we've set the goals, but it's very hard to get the Native Americans to come and go to work on those projects. So we're trying to attract people, but it's hard to get them out.
Go ahead, Paula, then Shauna.
Well, maybe I don't want to take us down off on this side journey, but maybe this is one of the things you want to talk about. And I only know from the design firm side, where we have across the country the designers, and this was an in-house design, so maybe it doesn't apply, but working on the mentor-protege concept with DBEs so that the larger design firms will adopt the DBEs and help them grow their business so that it's not a one and done on a state or public project, but you're helping them build capacity to eventually be able to do more in the industry. And I'm wondering, is there something like that in construction, or is there a way to build towards something like that where a construction firm adopts, a DBE contractor to help guide and educate along the way?
Paula, we do have mentor protege programs, and almost every contractor I know is involved in mentors. I personally am mentoring 4 different minority firms right now.
Good.
And so, yeah, we're doing that in the industry. I think we've built some very strong minority firms that are doing well. But, the goals continue and there's
Yeah.
only so much capacity they can take. And one of the things we do tell them is don't take too much work because it'll put you out of business. If you can't manage it and do it, we kill them with, especially if they're pretty good at what they do, we throw more work at them they can handle.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. And then of course we have all the federal rules that we can't help them in a lot of different ways, except through a mentor program. But if they're doing a project with us, we can't be involved in the management of their company. So we get our hands tied at the same time and trying to help.
So I just want to like call a few things out here, and just to say them. I think it's important. So Oregon, back in the day was founded as a white utopia. We do not have a lot of Black and brown folks who live in our state. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that this is a workforce development issue. And while we have the goals today, we really need to be building the pipeline of folks who can both work in construction and also own and operate their own firms so that in the future, we can make sure we have a bigger number of DBE firms to work on these projects. And so to that end, I'm really interested in, and I know we've talked about this before, but whether it's the Office of Civil Rights or how ODOT is participating in those workforce development programs. And I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole on we're talking about this specific project, but I just want to like frame that up that like, there's just such a finite number of folks who can meet these DBE goals we've set. And I think a more rational thing to do would be to set a lower goal today, but commit to the workforce development, commit to the mentoring programs, and increase those goals over time. And I will stop talking now. Thank you.
No, that's Shauna, that is why you're here, because I think we need to hear a lot of different approaches. And I agree with you. It's not enough just to have goals. We also have to be participating in workforce development. And I think we have some initiatives. Is it enough? Probably not. But it is something that we are gradually, we're getting there. We haven't achieved what we need to.
Yeah, if I may just real quick, Shauna, to your point, maybe Commissioner Smith, I'll have a quick conversation with Erica McAlpin, and whether we can get her to a future meeting or not, at least ask her in the Office of Civil Rights, Equity and Civil Rights, put together maybe just a quick email to let you guys know what we are engaged in, because we are, I think, doing vastly different things than we were 5 years ago in this space. Much of the conversations the CIAC has had about a bunch of different stuff over the last year. We just hired 2 small business navigators as an example of like putting energy into how are we assisting getting access to ODOT work as an example, which sounds pretty simple, right? But you got to have somebody doing that, and they just onboarded them within the last 2 months. So I'll take that as a follow-up to have a conversation with Assistant Director McAlpin too.
Mac.
Ken, welcome to being in front of the CIAC about a project, right? This group is not bashful. They'll start asking you the questions. Good job.
Awesome. Okay, well, it sounds like we're going to have some good thoughts on that too. That topic. So jumping into the scope of work for the project, this is oh shoot, there's a typo in here. Anyways, we're resurfacing the inside lane, the A lane, with 6 inches of asphalt in each direction in the A lane for a 20-year life cycle. And we've had good performance with our inside lanes where they don't get as much truck traffic on a continuous basis like you might see on I-5. In the truck lane or the B lane, we are going with we went with an 11-inch continuously reinforced concrete pavement. In the past, we would go with a 10-inch section, and that would give us about a 40-inch life. but we added an extra inch of section to give us a 50-inch life, so that around 30 years, when we start to see rutting develop in that B lane, the truck lane, we can profile that off and renew the surface without having to make another big investment in there. So that gives us a long life pavement. One of the things that was kind of helpful with this in the previous project, just to the east of this one, when we were negotiating, some of our mobility requirements, because this is a very mountainous, we have tight curvature, and we were going to have some pretty heavy width restrictions in the corridor here. And because we were doing all of the guardrail, we're doing the center barrier, we're putting in a 50-year life pavement, we made the case to them that, with these temporary restrictions being a little bit painful for about 2 years for some very narrow widths, we're out of their hair for about 50 years, and we'll still have some routine maintenance, but we're able to kind of sell the benefits of that, and that's going to help us out. Locally, we call that a black wall. Yes, please.
Your passing lane is only using asphalt. You only get 2 years out of it?
No, that's a typo. It should be 20.
Okay.
My apologies.
That's fine. How long does it last?
Well, we've historically gotten, 20 years or even a little bit better.
That's
in
good.
the A lane. The B lane is, when we're using asphalt out there, we're getting 6 to 7 years in this section. So that's why we've gone with, different materials for each lane. And then we do.
What is the cost differential when you went to the new material?
The concrete is going to have a higher upfront cost, but based on life cycle, it does work out a lot better. Off the top of my head, I don't have that cost differential, say, per mile. Maybe what I might do is ask Mark Keitlinger to jump in and give since he designed the project, if he's got that off the top of his head.
No, I don't need a precise. I'm just trying to get order of magnitude, and then kind of, is there a different climate impact with the different material? Is it better? Is it worse?
Well, from a climate standpoint, the thing is kind of interesting with the concrete. We're not going to touch that for 50 years. And, if we're out there with the section the way it existed prior to the project, we were out there about every 6-7 years doing pretty significant paving. So we're grinding something out, we're having to crush new rock, haul that in, new oil. You do recycle some of your oil, we're about 30-35% RAP, recycled asphalt product. But you've also got the equipment and the fuel, to run the equipment for that. So in the case of the concrete, we won't have that for another 30 years. Then we'll come through and we'll profile it. But even then, we're not producing material for that. We're just grinding off what's there. So, and later in the presentation, we do have a kind of a conversation around a test section of lower carbon cement or concrete section that we had there versus the if it had been paved, we'd have been out there on a pretty continuous basis. And then certainly every summer there were potholes and rut patching and things of that nature that we're needing to fill on a regular basis. Now over in the passing lane, not so much. We do get pretty good life out of that, and so we're able to use that lower cost material, and know we're going to get 15 to 20 years before we need to come back and do something with it. And typically the next treatment's going to look like some sort of a slurry seal, just a surface treatment without grinding it out to preserve the life that's there. We've got another project that's doing that right there at Baker City and going towards Ontario this summer, preserving the passing lane of a similar section just like this. So that's kind of the other things we did to kind of reduce a lot of our impact there. We didn't dig it clear out. We just kind of we didn't take it clear down to subgrade. We were able to utilize a lot of the base material that was already there. So we were able to minimize some of that new material that needed to come in. Also part of the project, we're resurfacing the interchange ramps with asphalt. They haven't been touched for probably 30 years or better. Guardrail standards, we're updated the guardrail and the center barrier. Those standards had changed, and so we're going to the taller barrier. And then we did have some barrier built under an old standard that had failed prematurely with concrete failure. And so we think that was, well, we know it was due to the chloride use up there with some salts. And so we've got a modified design for the new barrier that's designed to keep the chlorides out of the concrete, reduce the spalling, and protect it for the long haul. So that was part of the project. Also in the project, this is a narrow section of freeway, so the median was subject to legislative direction to put a barrier to close up the median to prevent crossover accidents. So we had some cable barrier installed in that. The things that are fairly unique is this quarry that was used to supply all of our projects on I-84, between Pendleton and LeGrand, is our primary source, but part of it had been depleted and is the site of the new Meacham maintenance station. But we needed some site work done up there at the maintenance station before we could get into the quarry. So from an efficiency standpoint and to reduce the conflict between the contractors, we added the site work and the paving for the maintenance station to the Meacham to Camila paving project. We already had a contractor mobilized that was going to be mobilized in there. It was going to be our cheapest cost for asphalt for the maintenance station. So there was some economy of scale in that. And then it also reduced some conflicts, potentially around timing between the vertical construction for the maintenance station and, our need, for using the quarry for the high freeway project.
Hey, Ken, real quick, just Commissioner Smith, you're going to get an opportunity to see the new Meacham maintenance station in July when we're over there for the OTC meeting. And I just want to reemphasize, like Ken's comment, we don't do a lot of vertical construction at ODOT, right? And so every 20 years we might build a new maintenance station. And we put it out to bid originally, and the prices were pretty high to have a vertical construction contractor do that much site prep work. So it was a good option for us to leverage all this freeway work at the same time we're building a maintenance station up there that hasn't had a new maintenance station since probably the 1920s or 40s. So anyway, it's a cool opportunity that we had that we don't get the opportunity often, but just a nice, I guess, alignment of schedules and efforts that ODOT is underway. And then color of money, federal funds versus state funds. We were able to work through all that, but I just wanted to double down on that point. And then Commissioner Smith, you're going to get an opportunity to see that, which is pretty cool. So.
And so was it done as part of a single bid package, or did you do like a change order? Oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was built into the project ahead of time. We saw this coming, and so we were able to modify the project plans, before they went out to bid. So that was included as biddable work. And then because of the unique nature of it, we had an on-site mandatory pre-bid so that the contractors understood, what needed to be done in the quarry and why it was being done, because it was going to invite a lot of questions. And so we wanted them to fully know what they were getting into. And to jump ahead, our bid price that we realized was, significantly under what our engineer's estimate was. So that was a good day for us. So we think those things added up to take some of that risk out. We heard about some of that risk earlier,
Right.
Cost estimate. That was one way to take risk out of the project that we could foresee for the contract.
Do you not typically have a mandatory pre-bid?
We typically don't. And so a lot of times, folks, they know, what our work's about. But if we do run into a situation that's unique, or we have some, site constraints or something unique that they're going to have to be aware of that could induce some undue risk into the project, we'll have sometimes voluntary pre-bids, but it's pretty rare for us to have a mandatory pre-bid. So. Okay, well, it looks like we're about halfway through our time, so I'll try to get through this a little bit sooner. Also included in this, we had some House Bill 2017 safety money. And so since we were working in the Umatilla County area, we added the upgrades to traffic signals throughout Umatilla County to this project, since that is mostly standalone work, but for really any contractor, but that was part of the project. Just a picture, just kind of a cross section of what our typical section was. So we had 11 inches of concrete in the truck lane. In the fast lane, we have 6 inches of asphalt concrete paving. It is modified with the ER oil, to reduce rutting. And then we paved the shoulders and the center barrier, or the median. So scope changes. So we originally scoped this as just the paving project. And as we discussed earlier, we add the county signals project to it because House Bill 2017 came along and the money was parked on this project, and we got bang for our buck out of the signal upgrades. Also, as we were developing the project, it was clear that we were going to need to coordinate the efforts for the Meacham maintenance station and bring some efficiencies to the site work on that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we needed to modify the concrete barrier design to increase life up there because of some of the early results of using salt. Meacham and I-84 in Eastern Oregon were some of the earlier adopters of salt, on the highway system. So we wanted to get ahead of that and try to make those more durable for the long run. So those were the things that we've changed from the time that we scoped the project to the time we bid it. During construction, our materials folks were working with OSU to look at ways to reduce carbon, associated with concrete. And our concrete mix design, we usually just try to get to 4,000 PSI. And a lot of times that's made up with cement. But if you're able to play with that matrix of rock and sand and cement, you can reduce that cement threshold or volume and still get your required strength. And so that's what we ended up doing in our second year of construction, because this was a 2-year construction for this project. And we were able to reduce the cement usage by about 15%. And I'm not a climate change calculator or climate expert, but what I'm told is that would yield a 6% reduction in carbon and greenhouse reductions associated with the concrete work. So not insignificant, especially if you look at what we do. And it was a matter of changing the constituent elements of the concrete mix, and we did that by change order because that came in the second year of the contract.
Questions about that? Oh, sorry, Sharon, go ahead.
That's all right. The section that you did as a test, what, how big of a test section was that?
Well, it turned into be a little bit bigger of a test section than what we intended. We were going to do like a day's worth of paving. If you're traveling through Eastern Oregon on I-84, exit 243 is the Mount Emily interchange. And westbound, if you're heading to Pendleton, from the time you get on that on-ramp or to the freeway, paving back towards Meacham, the majority of that is this mixed design. They did 1 day of it, and then they were switched back to the original mixed design, did another day of that, and then they switched back to the test design for the remainder of the project. So I would say the majority of the westbound is in this mixed design. And so what we should see from that is of course, the reduced concrete use and the carbon associated with that. But the other thing is cement cracks. And if we can reduce cracking with a lower cement ratio in there, that also helps us in the chloride conversation, because the chlorides make their way through the cracks into the reinforcement. And so we're hoping to get maybe some durability out of it too. So that's, we've got a number of things that we're tracking around cracking, durability, and then we got to test what the workability and the placement was like during construction.
My question, so first of all, that was part of my question. That's awesome. And just so you know, and well, you all probably know this, but concrete is incredibly carbon intensive. And so to the extent we can kind of decrease our usage of it, replace it with whether it's like things that sequester carbon, like fly ash, things like that, the better, as long as we're maintaining the strength of the road. I'm super interested in also adding in like sort of how can we continue to do work like that, and how can we increase the percentage of, or decrease the percentage of concrete in the roads in different weather conditions and different areas of the state. And so I think it's interesting to do it here. And I also think it would be interesting to do it in other zones of the state as well, and say like, oh, it works really well in these mountainous cold regions that experience these kinds of weather fluctuations and snow. It doesn't work as well in the valley where we get less snow, but more water, whatever it is. I think that'll be an interesting kind of data point as well. But this is awesome.
Yeah, it does raise some interesting questions about when to place it. You know, there's definitely a life cycle, carbon calculation, between asphalt and concrete. And, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And because a lot of times that decision is kind of almost made based on cost. You usually don't place it unless you have an absolute need for it, like, premature wearing concretes, or at intersections where you're shoving and pushing. For stoplights and things like that, or you have high volume and it's just unsafe to put up employees out there, and you just want something that's going to be as durable for as long as you can get. So lots of things to consider in that decision matrix.
Hey, Ken, I think, Shauna, to your point as well, I mean, this is an industry conversation that's happening internationally, right? And I think kudos to our team and Oregon State University taking this on during the course of this project to say what would make sense in a mountainous area. Certainly we can think about some Western states that have the same challenge that we have with the weather, but yeah, it's kind of fascinating how the climate conversation is playing out in this materials space, like real time. Like we're at an interesting place in transportation industry time sequence, I guess, right, for all this to be happening. So anyway, it's cool that this project had the opportunity to do that.
And Mac, to that point, like I think positioning ODOT as a leader and making sure the other states know we're doing this, sharing our data, what we're finding, I think is really a great opportunity as well. And seeing whether other states DOTs have had experiences in other regions, and maybe partnering and saying, okay, Washington, you do rainy places. Okay, Idaho, you do deserts, whatever it is. I don't know. Maybe there's a way to kind of get some savings there.
Yeah, well said. Ken, I'll stop interjecting because I know I keep screwing up your time frame, man. Keep going.
No worries. Shanna, to that effect, the professor that came up with this mixed design is going to a conference next week to present this to others, to share the academic and build that knowledge, with other academics to, try to tackle that problem. So, okay, so next one.
But don't assume that everyone's going to hear about it at that conference. You have to repeat it like hundreds of times in order for anyone to hear anything and remember it.
Okay. No, that's a good point. You always have to communicate, get the word out. Okay, we've already talked about this as this general site characteristics. So this project, because we're trying to accomplish so much at one time, and without going into multiple entries into this section and disrupt, traffic, we're accomplishing a lot of different type of work here. So, we've got $12.3 million in House Bill 2017 preservation funds. The $2 million for safety went to the signals. We have 12 million in interstate maintenance federal funds. Bridge jumped in. We had some bridge deck repairs, rail replacements for the tune of about $1.2 million. We had strategic investment funds, at $15.8 million. And then the $2.6 million you see for maintenance is mostly slated for the site development and prep work for the maintenance station, the work that was occurring up in the quarry. So we had a total authorization of $44.88 million, or 45.88. Yep. So we didn't quite meet the $50 million threshold, but we're close enough to, have a big project to talk about. Just kind of our actual cost, project design was $1.3 million. We had no reimbursable utilities. We had no right-of-way work. Construction estimate of completion is, for 44 million and some change. And then we had $9,000 in our other phase. And, typically that's going to be ARCI monitoring and things along that line. So that's how we come up with our authorization at that point. Design schedule, we started in June, late June of 18, and went to bid in November of 20. We were doing that intentionally in this environment. In the wintertime, when we bid any later than that, it's hard for contractors to see the project, to go check out the quarry, see how difficult that's going to be or how advantageous it's going to be to work in. So we intentionally bid these projects where we produce material in the fall or early winter, so that contractors have a chance to get up there and reduce their risk profile on the project. Construction, we issued first note, and notice to proceed went on February of 21. They were at second note, substantial completion in November of 22. And then they have some small drainage work or some water quality work, make some final adjustments to make sure one of our settling basins is properly adjusted, and working like it needs to be. It's too deep now. We're going to shallow that up, but they'll be done any day now on that. So we kind of talked about our DBE goals. That's one of our questions, how to increase participation. Our goal for this project for DBEs was 4%. Our actual was 5.6%. And that looks like a real positive, and it is. But you can satisfy your DBE goal by also purchasing materials from a DBE supplier. So in this case here, the asphalt on this project was purchased and trucked by a DBE firm to be incorporated in the project. So that was how that was accomplished. Our TARO goal is set at 25%. On this project, it came in at 14.1%. And like we talked earlier, there was other competing projects. And so in our meetings with the TARO that we have each spring, it's not that they have people sitting around that are being underemployed. They just don't have any more people to put at the project. And so we're fully utilizing the local TARO office in meeting that goal. So while we did fall short, and it is a little bit short of what they typically accomplish, they'll set goals around 25% across the board, and we'll float somewhere around 20%, if you're going to run them across the portfolio of projects. Just contract amount, just kind of as we progress through our contract amount, we started out with $36.4 million in biddable items. We had an anticipated item for 1.2 million. We had contingencies of 1.3. Construction engineering was around 4.3 for a total of 43.2 million. We did have some increases to the project of an additional 1.4 million. So our current construction, is that 44.6. So what kind of changes did we have on here? So we had 32 contract change orders on the project, which sounds high. But in our history of other projects of similar size and work, this is actually quite a bit lower. The project in the preceding section of freeway to the east that we completed a few years ago, it had 50 contract change orders for a similar dollar volume. In Lag Canyon, for a project that was about 2/3 the size of this, we had like 37 contract change orders. So we felt pretty good about that. There wasn't an inordinate amount of change orders required for this. Just kind of the breakdown, 4 of them were administrative, 6 were for the signal project, and technology changes fast enough, and during COVID and supply chain, some of the materials that we had relied upon in the past got reconfigured by the manufacturer and didn't function like they were supposed to. So we had to pivot from, say, camera detection and control of the intersection to radar. So we had a few of those in the signals. We had 16 change orders. A lot of them are substitute materials or some added work on the mainline paving. And then 6 of those were related to the site work related to the grading of the maintenance station in the quarry.
Hey, Ken.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking, how many of those change orders would you say were good things that we would expect to see in a project of this size, right? You don't know everything going into it versus, or is there some things that we missed during design? I don't want to say positive change orders versus negative change orders necessarily, but could you just give maybe a little context at the health of this project from your perspective?
I'd say most of them were pretty routine. The one that we probably could have learned a little bit more, is that third bullet under the highlighted CCOs, number 4. We had thinner asphalt in some spots than what we had anticipated. So, I think with some additional coring or, some pre-project work, we may have found that, but that was a $271,000 change order, for that. We had a big change order, that last bullet. It added about $900,000 of frontage road paving for our maintenance for a frontage road. The unit price that we got for the placement of that asphalt was advantageous enough that when they saw that, they wanted to add that to the project. So those are kind of good leveraging type CCOs. And then, like the change of some of the equipment on the signals came about for things we couldn't have anticipated, because the manufacturers had changed some of their equipment up because they were having supply chain issues and substituted different parts that didn't work as well and didn't integrate with our traffic signal control systems. So pretty routine. Sometimes you have material substitutions where you specify a material that is not easily produced. So out of efficiency, you go back to the engineer of record and find another suitable material that does the same job but is more readily available. So it makes it a little more efficient to get that material on the project.
Just jump in, Paula.
I don't want to jump the gun on what you might talk about next, but was there any work zone safety issues during the life of the project?
We have had really good luck with work zone safety on here. And that's one of the things I, thought went really well on the project. What we ended up doing is we did crossovers so that we isolated the work zone from the live traffic.
Yeah.
And then in Eastern Oregon, because of our traffic counts, if we don't have a lot of curvature or some abrupt changes, a lot of times we will go ahead and do our traffic separation with tubular markers versus concrete barrier, and that's a pretty significant savings.
Yeah.
And we've done that for the 30 years I've been here at ODOT, and we've had a very good track record, very safe. And really it comes down to the fact knowing that based on the context where we're at, we have 2-lane highways that have higher ADTs around the Pendleton and Hermiston area than we do on the freeway. So we know we can safely drop speeds, and separate the traffic and isolate them, isolate the workers from the live traffic with those crossovers. I don't recall any significant incidents in the 2 years that we were under construction on this project. I mean,
Oh, that's good. I know WashDOT, even maintenance crews have had just a terrible rash of the barrier trucks getting hit and the attenuators, usually in the urban areas with impaired drivers. But did you notice that the legislature in Washington just passed a work zone electronic speed control bill this year? So they're going to start putting speed control cameras in work zones, which is interesting.
Yeah, we've been tracking that because outside of this work zone, we do get a lot of ill behavior, from people,
Sure.
running automatic flagging stations, running past our flaggers. We do get a lot of misbehavior, and our crews would love to be able to do that. So I think it's something that, we're watching to see how that implements, and how that plays out in Washington as an additional enhancement.
And how long is it taking you to process a change order now to get it from conception to approval?
It really varies, and I suspect you know that. It depends on a lot of factors. For something that's fairly simple, where changing something, it could be a few days. If we're waiting on pricing from the contractor, and we're needing to get that information, it takes a little bit of time to process that. Sometimes it's a standards change, and it takes a little bit of coordination in Salem for that. So I think it's a matter of a few days, but I have seen some, I'll be honest, on some projects, they'll linger out there for months because it's sitting on somebody's desk, and it sits on a lot of different desks, whether it's the sub to the prime to this, to the RE, or the RE to his area manager, or someone up the line. So I don't know if that provides the answer you're looking for, Ted, but do recognize that there's a difference. I've got some that are sitting out there that, I'll be honest, the contractor never provides us, the pricing, and so we had to unilaterally, implement one. But it depends on who's motivated to make it work. So.
Yeah, the number one issue with minority contractors is always getting paid for changes. They're given a change, told to go do it. They price it, told to go do it long before it's approved, and then they don't get paid for it for months. And they constantly say, "Do I have to do them? Why do I have to do it? I don't get paid for it." So I'm just curious if that's getting kind of picked up and taken care of.
Well, over the years, we've tracked timelines, for how long it takes for a change order to, move from inception to execution, and so as an agency, we are watching that. We do check the metrics on that from time to time, but there's a lot of different places it can get hung up. But I think if people are motivated to make it work and move it on from, each of the responsible parties in that chain, it can move pretty quickly.
Yeah. Thanks.
Just some things to construction changes that is I kind of wanted to highlight. We had a large fuel and asphalt escalation. If we bid this right when oil and fuel prices went up, and by standard language in our contracts, to take some of that risk away from the contractors, we own that risk around oil and fuel escalation. So we had about a $2.4 million asphalt escalation. We brought in $1 million of the frontage, from maintenance for the frontage road, and then we deobligated some of the maintenance facility funding because some of their costs came in lower than what was anticipated. So we returned some funds back to maintenance, and they were able to use that for their vertical, portion of the project. So those are the big money moves, for the project. So just some of the issues we worked through. When we started into the design, it was a much wider section to meet today's standards. So we went through a value engineering study. Even before House Bill 2017 would require that, we were doing that in order to get to a more context, relatable, typical section for this road, and it matches the sections on either end. And then ultimately we got to a final design that matched the existing pavement width. So we were able to reduce a lot of additional earthwork. It was a challenge for us to find DBE firms. A lot of them just don't exist out here. We do have some subs, mostly in the traffic control, or in the case of our paving projects, we do have one firm that resells asphalt oil and supplies it to the prime and meets the goal that way. Inflation was huge for us. We started out with a project that was around 35 million. We had projected costs up to 50 million by the time we were estimating and keeping up with inflation. Fortunately, we bid a little bit below that 50 million to get in there. And then coordinating the vertical construction with heavy highway construction. Vertical firms aren't used to the standard specifications and design standards and ODOT's contract, to be able to integrate their earthwork into what we're used to. And then, segregating the costs and the timing of the costs were the things that were a bit of a challenge and took quite a bit of work on Sean's part to get this all coordinated together. And in the end, it did work out quite well. So those are some of the project issues and challenges we had. What went well, the value engineering study was great. We really enjoyed that. It confirmed where we wanted to go with things. The reduced carbon concrete test section went well. We talked about the mandatory pre-bid. Bidding in the fall allowed us to get started on early material site development and material production. Our bids did come in below the final engineer's estimate. I know our number for Taro was low, but in light of how constrained they were and how stretched they were, we thought we had a solid Taro participation on the project. And then we had good work zone protection with no major accidents. We did pick up a lot of tubular markers and reset those each day, but we did have a really safe work zone. So that's kind of the project in the nutshell. Wanted to thank you guys for the opportunity to present this to the CIAC. So after going through the presentation, I didn't know if there's any thoughts on the questions or feedback that we were asking for. If you had some other thoughts of feedback that we should be thinking about.
Well, we touched on the first two bullet points quite a bit during the presentation. And I guess the question about increasing contractor competition, I'm going to ask Ted if he can weigh in on that, since he is definitely one of our resident experts.
Well, maybe I can explain the context a little bit more here. There's been a lot of contraction and acquisition in our highway contractors. And so there's one firm that has bought a number of smaller firms that we'd normally see on a project like this. But once one division of that larger firm expresses an interest in pursuing that project, the other divisions are out. And so, because they don't want to compete internally within the company.
Is that more the paving companies?
A lot of them are pavers that would have done this, or, a combination of earthwork. We still seem to have pretty good competition in bridge. So that's been good, but it's mostly been the paving companies.
Hey, Ken.
Yes.
Correct if I'm wrong, but didn't we see the successful contractor on this one actually come out of the Idaho side, since you're so close there, isn't that what we saw as their division come out of the Idaho office?
Yeah, in Eastern Oregon, we do attract, we have been successful in getting a few out-of-state firms. So Knife River, Idaho Division, or Mountain West Division bid on this one. And they had also successfully competed and got the Lad Canyon project that completed the year before this one went to. So we're starting to build some familiarity with them and them with us. In the ADA program, we've been able to successfully pull a firm out of Washington that's been successful for us and been a big player in our ADA delivery.
How many bidders did you have on this project?
I'm thinking we were in that 5 range.
That's good.
Well, I'm spoiled. Back in the day, you'd see 8 or 9. So,
Anything more than 3 sounds good to me.
well, and typically though, I mean, we're seeing 2 bids, 3 bids, you know, other types of project work. You know, we have bridge projects that have 2 bids. And I think on this project, it is the large project in Eastern Oregon. And, you know, the firms that were out here knew it was coming, and we market our projects to firms prior to going to bid. We will call up firms and say, hey, this is going to hit the streets, take a look at it, and then leave it at that. And then let them decide whether they want to pursue that or not. So we're trying to be a little more aggressive about that. But that's kind of playing in the existing pool. You know, trying to bring new people into the pool has been a bit of a challenge. You know, where there's a lot of money to be made in the private sector. Hopefully, maybe that pendulum will swing back to us a little bit. Some of the firms that we've had in the past have been pretty heavy in private construction and have kind of stepped away from ODOT, you know, government work. So,
Well, I think as we see the IIJA funds starting to roll out, we're going to see a lot more competition. It's going to be harder and harder to get multiple bids.
Yeah. I think it's hard on the interstate to bundle other paving work in the area, but have you done any of that with local agencies, like when a state highway is a main street, to bundle their paving needs with the state highway needs to get better bids?
let me think here. Good question, Paula. I was just talking about an example earlier today where we did some airport paving in conjunction with a highway project, but that was 2 state agencies. So we did that. We did work with the city of Burns. They had extremely high bids on a project last year. We talked to them about timing their bidding with the timing of a paving project that we had last summer, you know, and they rebid and they were able to successfully do that. So we're trying to do a little bit of coordinating. So not necessarily putting their work on our paper, but if we can bring in someone who's bringing in an asphalt plant, bring a little competition into that market by timing their work with what we're planning or vice versa. We've been doing a little bit of that.
I think one of the major problems, though, in getting competition is major firms are buying up the rock sources. So they own the quarries there, and you can't go out and start up a quarry anymore. I mean, it's quite a process to do that. So they're buying the existing quarries that are approved and you can work out of, and it's pretty hard to get competition when you only got one rock supplier and he's bidding the job.
Now, Ted, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'm going maybe down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but about 20 years ago in Eastern Oregon, we had a aggregate firm buy around an ODOT source that was going to basically landlock us. And we realized what they were up to because it was the key source for a particular corridor. And so we've identified a series of strategic material sources around Eastern Oregon that are within a reasonable haul distance of our major projects. And so we've really doubled down our effort to expand and permit and maintain those strategic material sources, just so that when we get into, say, like Grant County, there's one commercial aggregate source. We've got a couple ODOT owned sources that we can make available. And we do that everywhere. A lot of times they don't use our source, but at least it's available for someone who wants to come in and crush and set up a plant. They can go into an agency supplied source. And we've tried to have that within a reasonable haul distance of our projects.
That's great. If you can continue to do that, that would really help.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge with land use. We need Goal 5 protections to be a little bit easier to protect that, because what happens is we'll have a source that's out there for 50 years and then someone gets a permit to build a house next to it and then they're working to shut it down. And so the Goal 5 protection allows us to continue that mining use. And that's been something that's a priority or an interest of ours, to not only have the source, but be able to protect the longevity of it.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, as we work to wrap up here, can you talk just a little bit about not very many projects of $50 million in Region 5, much to our chagrin, right? You deliver a $50 million project every year if we'd let you.
He'd deliver it under 50 million.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, Sharon, part of that was, I was thinking about, if we bid that project right now, how much would it cost given what inflation's done, right? Since that time we put it out, even with our challenges. That aside, Ken, can you just talk I think briefly around what a project of this size has done? And you guys have had several over the last 15 years, but can you just talk about that from like a culture of the region and a culture of project delivery and all the things you walk through, but just could you talk about like what it means to have a project of that size and how it, I think, positively influences small projects too? I'd like you to maybe say a little bit there, and then Commissioner Smith, I think we can work to wrap this up and talk about the next meeting.
No, that's a good question, comment. These large projects are the ones that really get our crews excited because they're getting to use the full range of the things that they've gone to school and to learn and train for. And it's a good skill builder for us. Over the years, I've watched, the various designers that have taken on these larger projects, and it's just such a leap forward in their professional growth and development, which is great for them and it's great for us. And you just don't get that in the smaller projects. We can get really efficient in the small projects and turn them out the door pretty quickly. But these big projects cause you to look at, how things come together on projects, interactions against multiple disciplines, and then also you have to think about, the outcomes of the project, for the ultimate contract that's going to go out the door. So when I'm looking at outsourcing work for design, this is the type of project we hold on to, because this builds that professional growth and strength, for our employees. That's good for them, but also makes us a more credible partner with our contractors and our consulting firms, because we've been there, we've done that, we understand the issues related to that design. And so when we have these big projects, it's fun to watch the maneuvering in the various crews to see who can get on these projects and work on them, because it is a good one to have. So big projects are great. I love them for that. Sometimes we do get a little bit of concern from smaller firms that they can't take on big projects like this. And so there's kind of a balance we try to achieve on, what's the economical size of a project to deliver. But for a heavy maintenance project on the freeway like this, 50 million, seems to be a sweet spot for us, because you can get about 10 miles of paving done. You're making a big chunk of work, and we can get in and get out. If we were doing this on smaller $10 million, chunks, we'd be continually out there affecting traffic as we're rolling. But these big projects are fun. People look forward to them. We've got 3 people on the call, from Region 5 that, had a good opportunity on this project, from either leading it, managing the design of it, or, designing it and using it to, train younger designers that are assisting on the project. and or delivering the contract that has a lot of complexity to it, like Josh needed to do on this project. So yeah, we love these big projects. If there's a way to get more of them, we'll take them.
Well, thank you, Ken, and your whole team. What a great project. It not only is great for the ODOT staff and crew, but the community. I mean, it really, this kind of a magnitude project in Region 5 has a huge impact on the entire community in a positive way. So congratulations, and really thank you all for being here to help us understand it.
Yep, thank you.
Good job, Kim.
So maybe before we do a little wrap up, I wanted to touch base on a couple of quick issues. One is our next meeting, we have on the calendar to be a hybrid where we could maybe meet in person. And I just wanted to touch base maybe with Ted and Paula to see, is that something that is, feasible for you to be there in person, or just, should we just keep it virtual?
What was the date again?
It is
August 16th. I just looked.
August 16th.
I'm always looking for a good excuse.
I know it's nice to be able to get back together in person, but it can be really challenging on calendars, especially
That's
this
true.
summer.
Yeah, and it feels like we're pretty effective in this mode.
This committee seems to be, and which brings me to my other question, which is, we are down 2 members now, unfortunately. And if either of you have any thoughts on potential people you think might be a good addition, please reach out either to me or to Matt with some names, because we're going to be starting to do a little bit of a search to get a full complement on our.
Is there a skill set you're looking for that is a gap?
Well, it'd be nice to, have somebody who can represent the way Amber did, which is going to be tough to find, but somebody with that, that DBE, that perspective that we really need to have. And she was such a strong voice.
Yeah.
So I think one there, and then, I think somebody maybe from more of a local government perspective. We haven't, we've been missing that voice. Mac, any other thoughts on?
I think those are good. I immediately went to workforce, right? So the role, I think Amber's background obviously was well represented here, but something in workforce. I like the addition of local government. And I think just as I think about funding package conversations coming up in 2025, I've been writing on my whiteboard, who are our partners that are maybe non-traditional partners of transportation. So yeah, obviously all of you have connections and thoughts around who you work with in the industry, but that's the other one that comes to my mind as we are about ready to enter hopefully a successful funding package conversation.
We had somebody from Portland Bureau of Transportation, didn't we, on this group?
No.
We had Michael Jordan, who was with the
Right.
Portland. He at the time was in their water.
Oh,
That's probably who you're thinking of, Paula.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me.
Yeah, give it some thought, and then I don't know if you want to maybe look at your calendar and think about it. We can reach out before the next meeting, which is 2 months away, and just test people when we get a little closer. Is this going to, make sense as a hybrid or in person or not?
Right now I'm free that week, so I could make it work.
So
But
am I.
whatever you all want to do.
Oh, okay. Great, Ted. I mean, I'd really like to do it in person, at least a couple of times a year. So let's keep it as an option, and we'll reach out to Shauna. She had to leave early, so.
Okay.
I have a strong DB contractor who would, I think, be very good at this.
Great.
I'll reach out to him and see if he has an interest.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But if he does, I'll bring him forward to you.
Terrific. I don't know, Mac, if we have any recaps we need to capture.
The only one I captured was just, I'll have a conversation with Assistant Director McAlpin about maybe an update on workforce, even if it's just a quick one pager or email out to, because I think there's some good stuff and I know they've been working on communicating that to others. So I'll follow up with her on that.
Great. Well,
was-
thank you.
That was the only thing I wrote down.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Thank you, everybody. A great meeting today, as always. And I can appreciate all your time and effort that you put into being here and the staff who make these presentations. I think it's great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a good meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ken.